Hey everybody, wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. We're going to take a deeper dive into understanding and utilizing Act 55. Today we have Will Fullerton, VP of Government Affairs with CENTEGIX, and myself, Ryan Baswell, Channel Manager with CENTEGIX. The agenda for today is we're going to touch on the Pennsylvania Safety Grant Overview. We're going to jump into key factors for choosing the right technology when it comes to a rapid response technology, and then what is Crisis Alert. Will, I'm going to turn it over to you to start us with the grant.
Thanks, Ryan. Good afternoon, everybody. Before we jump into Pennsylvania Act 55, I wanted to quickly, because the U.S. Department of Education released it today, and they gave indication earlier that they were about to, wanted to briefly talk about the Safer Communities Act of 2022 that was passed by Congress and subsequently signed by President Biden this summer. Today, they are providing guidance and releasing the first $1 billion out of about 4.25 of the total appropriation. This is specifically for Title 4-A of ESEA, sorry. And what it is it's looking at the mental health and emotional health of students, as well as some physical needs. Usually this is a formula grant, as it says, but for this process, states can bypass that process to make awards on a competitive basis to high need LEAs, and that's up to the state's discretion. That money will flow to states starting today. The requirements for states and then districts, and as they vet useful systems to focus on strategies to meet those social, emotional, and physical needs, is there has to be community engagement, as well as using safety and policies and practices that advance equity and then recognize trauma. What's still to come in that is 1.4 billion, excuse me, for the JAG and STOP grants, which I think most folks on this call are probably aware of already, and then the related authorized programs that go hand in hand with those. As you see, 800 million for substance abuse and mental health services, $1 billion for schools, for safe schools and citizenship education, as well as $500,000 each for school-based mental health services grants, and then also the mental health service demonstration grants. And as we look at what Act 55 covers, anyone who's submitted an application for this grant has submitted it, and they know if they've been awarded, most likely. There are a host of inclusions and allowable expenses that include school safety and security committee membership, a survey campus by campus, district by district of school mental health services. I've starred the next several because they're new things to code in Pennsylvania. That's a formula-based grant program for school safety and security, as well as school mental health, the school-based mental health internship program, in coordination with the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency. And then there are new requirements for school safety and security coordinators. And there's also some available dollars for training and professional development requires for current and future school personnel. And then it moves the allowable kind of categories of expenses up to 30. And where Crisis Alert, where our solution that we're going to dive into today falls in, is number 12 on the list. That relates to security planning and purchase of security-related technology. And so, like I said, the grants are formula-based as established by the law. The base amount for each school campus is $100,000 for mental health activities and $100,000 for physical security enhancement. And then they add in additional funding based on the school's 2020, 2021 adjusted average daily membership. It's different for intermediate units, area career and technical centers, as well as charter schools. They both get $70,000 in base for mental health activities, and then as well as physical security enhancements. They do not receive the bump for average daily membership. And then if your school has not yet met Tier 1 of School Safety Center's behavioral health and physical security baseline standards, these funds first must go to get you to that baseline level in those two categories and the audits thereof. And I'm going to turn it back over to Ryan to dive into what our solution does. And I think, as we think about the two pots of money, both from the federal and state side, and as the folks on this webinar think about their school safety budgets and planning, Crisis Alert fits a lot of those requirements. And if there's questions afterwards, feel free to email us. All our contact info will be at the end.
Thanks, Will. So wanted to touch on how Crisis Alert fits in. So a little bit more on how the solution works and what we've seen across the country is we're protecting over 2 million folks across the country in over 3,000 locations, and we're expanding and growing like crazy. And what we've seen is a layered security approach. Most folks have prevention and preparation in place, whether that's cameras, etc., but there's really a lack with response. So with Crisis Alert, we want to make sure that folks have a response technology in place to help work with that prevention and preparation as those three work right together. And what we've seen with the evolution of response technology is we really started off with the wall button. Most folks are very familiar with it. It's the big button beside the door usually that's on the wall that you just go over and punch. And then we've integrated to two-way radios, which a lot of solutions actually integrate with, and we still use today. And then we jumped to digital signage, which has started to go away a little bit, but being able to take over the screens, what we'll touch on here shortly. And then about 7 years ago, the mobile apps came around, and we were all excited. They were the greatest thing, and they were very sleek. And then what we've seen is, of course, with Crisis Alert, is we've transitioned to that wearable badge that fills a lot of those gaps that the mobile apps don't have. And what those are, why Crisis Alert is it's a one button activation. So what we've seen is we've done a ton of studies with directors of security, SROs, and law enforcement is what to do in the case of an emergency and what is the best solution. And that is something simple. We want to keep it simple, and that's what Crisis Alert does, is it requires 3 presses of the button or multiple for a lockdown, which we'll touch on, making sure that everybody has it. So no low adoption rate of app-based solutions, 100% staff wearable. And then what we've seen is making sure that we're covering that entire campus. So you can see here, we want to blanket even that football field back in the left corner. We want to make sure that parking lots are covered. So making sure that the entire campus is blanketed with a safety solution. And then making sure that audio and visual notifications and communications come through. With app-based approach, we're reliant on cellular service and Wi-Fi. Our solution uses a Bluetooth Zigbee mesh network that is not reliant on cellular service as well as Wi-Fi. And then, of course, making sure that folks know exactly where we are in the case of an emergency. We want to be able to respond quickly, and that's what our solution does. It takes you within 5 to 8 feet of where that person is when they activate that alert. And what I mentioned a little bit earlier is one badge, 2 types of alerts. So we have our staff alert, and that's about 99% of the alerts that we hear on a daily, weekly basis. So that is your medical emergencies, your fights, things like that we come across in a school on a daily basis. We want to make sure that we're there to help get folks there as quick as possible. We have students and calls that we have all the time, folks calling in. We recently had a student that went down with a seizure. The staff member was able to click the button 3 times. Help came within a matter of seconds. She was able to clear out desks so that student had plenty of space not to hurt themselves. And she didn't have to worry about punching into the phone on the wall or pulling out her cell phone to notify folks of an alert. And then lastly, we have our campus-wide alert, and we train on keep clicking the button, and a couple things will happen. it'll actually, the strobes that come along with the system will begin to light up. We have a option for a PA takeover as well, and then also screen takeover. And you can see here, this is a staff alert. So 3 clicks of the button, you can see what happens. That screen takeover for that responder team. So the staff alert is all internal, and that is built around a staff response team, where usually it's about 4 to 5 folks per school. And what they will get is this notification you can see here on their computer as well as their mobile device. It sounds similar to an Amber Alert. So they're going to know that Ryan Baswell activated a staff alert in office 301. And they're going to be able to rush to the scene as quick as possible. This just kind of gives you a better understanding, better look at what that looks like. You can see here that staff alert was activated. You can see I am right outside of office 121. And once again, that will take you within 5 to 8 feet of where exactly I am. You can see who activated the staff alert and what time it was. And then you're able to close that out based on what that was. Was it a medical emergency? Was it a fight? Etc. Then our campus-wide alert, so that is for those more serious active shooters, weather emergency, nearby incident. And that is, like I mentioned earlier, keep clicking the button and a couple things will happen. That screen takeover, PA takeover, and then notifying local law enforcement if you would like to integrate. And you can see here, you have your visual cues with the strobes going there on the wall. You have your audio, so making sure that folks are able to hear over the PA system that there is an alert, whether that's a lockdown. We want to make sure that they have their protocols as well. So that's where we would actually take over the computer screens you can see here, and that can flash their protocols or your protocols actually on that screen, letting them know what to do in the case of an emergency. And then lastly, being able to alert those first responders. So tying into your local PD and law enforcement, making sure that they are able to actually see that alert as well and take action. And you can see here, this is a good example of what a screen takeover would look like. You can see that we have our protocols flashed here on the screen, and we want to make sure that we understand what's happening and what to do in the case of a lockdown. Then we do have an app as well that we are able to use. This is our companion app. So this is gave to that response team. A lot of folks give it to custodians that are working outside. So if they see something, they're able to also use the badge, but also pull out their cell phone if it's a lesser emergency. A lot of times we hear that superintendents are at conferences and they're able to actually put the building into shelter in place if there's storms coming their way, a tornado warning, whatever that looks like. And then also have the ability to, we recently had a story where a custodian was able to actually pull out their phone, put the building into lockout because they had a police chase that was going actually through the school. So a lot of different flexibility there. And then we're also able to tone those strobes to whichever color. So if it's a medical emergency, if it's a lockout, that can be yellow, medical emergency can be blue. Just to give you guys an idea what that looks like, you can see here that beacon is actually flashing in yellow, and that screen takeover is notifying that that is a lockout. And I like this this picture because we actually monitor all this in the background, as well as yourself. So you're able to see if any of your strobes or hubs are offline, which we'll talk about here shortly. But you can see this blankets the entire campus. So you can see the parking lots are taken over, the entire campus. And what you're able to do is if somebody were to knock the strobe off, you're able to see exactly where that is, as well as the health of it. So our badges have a 5 to 7 year life, battery life, and you're able to monitor that. Once they get to 50%, we're able to send you out a new one. We want to make sure that that equipment is up and running and working correctly. And just a quick overview of how the system works. You can see here we have our gateway. Essentially that plugs into the server, and then that creates that Bluetooth Zigbee network. So not reliant on cellular service or Wi-Fi. We have our own proprietary software and network that we run on. So IT folks love it in the fact that it's not bogging down their current network and Wi-Fi. You can see here some of the integrations. So we have our gateway, our badge, and our locating beacon. And what that does is that talks to the strobes. And then we also have those integrations. So that desktop takeover, that intercom integration, integration with two-way radios, command center, and that responder app. And then also on the back end, being able to look at all of those analytics. So if we're having a ton of fights in lunch around 12 to 12:30, we can actually place an additional staff member there during lunch, and we can see those trends. And then also being able to integrate with your local law enforcement and have them respond to those lockdowns and emergencies. And I'd like to quickly end here. There's a couple things that I like to call out on this slide is the folks that are using this on a daily basis, and that's where we see Crisis Alert really is being used, is it's on a daily basis. It's for those medical emergencies. It's for those fights. We want to send help as quick as possible. And I think Chief Newman down in Hillsborough County says it best. Crisis Alert is a force multiplier, giving law enforcement 25,000 sets of eyes in ears. So making sure that everybody, whether it's a substitute teacher, whether it's the band director, they're able to see everything. And if they need it or a case of an emergency, they're able to call for it. It streamlines the process and make sure that we send help right away. And I'd like to open up the last about 10 to 15 minutes here for questions. Will be taking care of
it. Yeah. So the first one is the grant deadline has passed. Can I still adjust my application? Yes, there are a few. The department, PCCD, the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, if they need corrections, first and foremost, they're going to ask you to amend it regardless. And you'll get an administrative notification soon, I would imagine, if you haven't already. Secondly is there's a provision in the grant that that the state money specifically behind this grant that they're utilizing ARPA dollars for cannot supplant any program already in place or a program where there's already state or federal money involved specifically for that program. So if you've done that in your application, first and foremost, you'll need to inform the department, and then they'll let you kind of clean it up. And then if you find that you want to amend it, you need to contact directly the e-grants department at Pennsylvania CCD, and they'll work you through the process. They are currently reviewing and making decisions on all of these. So the opportunity still exists, as well as through negotiation and implementation. The next question I see up here is there flexibility in terms of payment for the system?
Correct. Yeah. So we have a ton of flexibility. We have a lot of districts that we're working with now, especially with grant funding. You're able to essentially, if you want to pay for the system while you have the grant funding all up front, you can. We work in a 3- and 5-year agreement. We have another couple of school districts that are paying 60% of a 5-year deal. They're paying 60% of that year 1, 20% of that 5-year year 2, 20% of that 5-year deal year 3, and then essentially years 4 and 5, they're not paying anything.
Thank you. Are you experiencing supply chain issues or any delays?
We are not. We've been very busy, but we have plenty of equipment. Our install teams are out working daily, so we've done a great job through everything, is making sure that we have plenty of equipment as well as installers that are going out to locations on a daily basis.
Okay, here's one. If the badge is mistakenly pressed while I'm at home, will it initiate an alert?
It will not. So it's within that network, being on campus, even outside. We do cover, like I mentioned, outside, whether that's on the football field, whether that's in the school parking lot. But if you're at home, that will not trigger an
Well, that kind of leads into the next question I've got up here. I see. What about an incident on a playground? How's the system handled outside of the building, so to speak?
Yeah, so we've had tons of calls of folks that have had incidents outside of the school, whether it's a student that may have a medical emergency or a staff member. They're able to hit the badge 3 times, and that response team is going to come right away. That 3-button push, you get that vibration notification that helps on the way. So you're not having to take out your cell phone. You're not having to take out a walkie-talkie. You have the badge that's going to send help right away.
What kind of data does your solution provide?
Yeah, so we have a ton of analytics behind the system. So being able to determine whether that is a medical emergency, whether that's a drill, whether that's a fight, whether that is a lockdown, and you're able to place folks, throughout the school. If we're having a ton of issues in one location, you can look at that as a district as a whole or per building. So that's a lot of flexibility with CENTEGIX, and folks like the fact that they can have analytics behind why are the alerts happening and what's happening in certain areas. If there's a school building that's having more issues than others, and they're able to place those staff members accordingly.
This one goes back to messages on the alert screen. Are those editable? Can a school or a district change those?
They are correct. Yeah, those can be edited to whatever the school's protocols are. They're able to design that however they'd like.
All right. Student data privacy. Obviously, there's a focus. This next question is what kind of student data or any personal data is involved in Crisis Alert?
So we're not collecting any student data or privacy. We're not touching any of that. We're able to close the alert out based off of what the scenario was, and you're able to see all of that data on the background. So there's no touching the student's data. We keep away from that, and we make sure that the analytics are just based off of what is the scenario and why is it being closed out.
Awesome. That is all I see in the queue. Once again, everybody feel free to drop any other questions in. We'll pause for a second. Yeah.
Okay. And lastly, if you're interested in taking a deeper dive into Crisis Alert, feel free to reach out to us. The contact information is down below. Once again, my name's Ryan Baswell, and we have Will Fullerton on with us as well. So we'd love to take you through a deeper dive into the solution and help however we can.
All right.
Will, any last words?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, thanks again, guys, for joining us today. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We look forward to talking with you. Thank you.